But yeah, it's definitely an interesting business for those who have not been in the car business or been around it. If you ever want a crash course in life and business, then that's the space to go check out.
It's definitely something that if you need to do it and you want to you could make overnight money. You could make a $10,000 paycheck in a month if you just show up, you apply yourself, you listen.
This is the Mostly Middle Tennessee Business Podcast, a podcast about Middle Tennessee business owners and professionals.
Mostly. As always, thank you, Mr. Matt Wilson, for the big voice. So, dude, if you had to start a salacious conspiracy, what would it be? Where would you begin? Should I have primed you with that question beforehand?
Yes, absolutely.
Think about it as we go,
Okay.
Maybe it'll just naturally come up. I've been starting the podcast differently these days because, I don't know, just, a little bit more casual.
Now, are you talking about a conspiracy that I have myself or one that's out there?
You know what? I mean, maybe building on one. Let's try that.
The Comtrails thing. I don't really understand that, but I know it's a big conspiracy right now. So
Right.
I would probably lean towards that and then maybe do a little bit more research on it.
The chemtrail kind of conspiracy with, I could see that.
Yeah.
That's something that's got some legs and, wings, so to speak. Possibly. Yes, this is the Mostly Middle Tennessee Business Podcast you're tuning into, where we talk to Middle Tennessee business owners, entrepreneurs, professionals of all kind, and we just have natural, real conversations that meander and all that fun stuff. Today, got another old friend from the car business. You know that in the previous episode, actually a couple of episodes ago, I had another friend of mine, Mike Mercurio, that was in the car business. This gentleman today is also from that dealership, but all of us have evolved to do different things over the years, but stayed in touch.
Absolutely.
So, Mr. Matt West, thank you for being on today, buddy.
Thanks for having me, Jim.
Yeah.
It's awesome. It's my first podcast.
First podcast being a guest on?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
You're kind of working at a company that does podcasting. You're not doing anything there? Or?
No, not really. I mean, I've got a gentleman by the name of Josh Gregory, Vanderbilt grad. I always say I have a face for radio.
Right.
Me too. And probably not the voice. But Josh is just, he's a very charismatic, good looking guy. Very big personality. He and a young lady by the name of Giovanni Terry, actually co-host our podcast, which is, Shipping and Handling, Route Consultant podcast.
There you go. And that company is Route Consultant that you work for currently. You are the CEO.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
Right. And you came from a storied lineage. I want to say your dad, your family was in the car business.
Yeah, I always said we were one of two paths. Either we were car guys or bankers.
Right.
Because that's, kind of my family lineage. But
odd. That's crazy.
I know. It's a crazy mix. But no, my dad was in the car business for, gosh, I don't know, over 20 years. He was a GM, started out, sales, F&I, sales manager, GSM, GM. But he did that for a long time. So naturally, when I say naturally, but I went to college, had all the aspirations of doing something different. My dad, I remember, I think I was like 15 years old. Maybe I was probably 16 because I was driving at the time. And I was sitting in his office and I always had to wait my turn, because he had so many people in and out. And I remember he finished up and everybody had exited the office. I was sitting in his office. He pulled his glasses off, set them down on the table, on the desk, and leaned back in his chair. And he said, make me a promise. I said, what's that? He said, go to college, get a degree, and don't ever get in the car business.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay.
Yeah.
So then I went to college. And then immediately got in the car business because I was like, I had all my buddies that were graduating college and they were going to these entry level jobs making, $35,000, $45,000 a year. And I thought, I want more than that. Like there are things that I want to do, things I want to buy, places I want to go. And I know that I can make way more than that in the car business. So that was kind of the motivation for me to do that. So I actually left college with 18 hours. I thought that I could actually still work in the car business and finish my college degree. And then I realized very quickly the demands and the time that you have to spend in that business, or the expectation of the time that you're going to spend in that business, was so much more that I couldn't. So I ended up not finishing college, but then ended up going back a few years later. Gosh, I don't know, probably 6 years later, and finishing my degree.
It is a life-consuming business.
It is.
As you know, anything that you do in life, radio was like that for me. And then I got into, as you know, the car business around 2013, about midway through, and it was. And Mike and I talked about this, was the fact that I still had like one leg out the door, 1 foot out the door for the first couple of months. And until I really committed, that's when everything started popping.
Yeah.
But there was always that notion of what if I could actually continue doing what I was doing in radio just for myself. But it was one of the best learning experiences of my life being in that business.
I agree completely. And I was kind of the same way. I was like, I can have, 1 foot in and then, 1 foot out and, finish my degree. And then if I decide this isn't for me, then I can pivot and, do, marketing and sales or, finance, which was my minor, majored in business administration and marketing with a minor in finance. So I was like, I kind of go either way. But once I got in that business and realized that you can't have 1 foot in, 1 foot out, if you're going to do it successfully and make money, then you have to be all in. That's the only way to do it. And I did. I went all in. I mean,
It's such an interesting business.
It is.
And it's
wild.
It's evolved so much over the past several decades. I think even more so probably since 2020, because it feels like it's heading in a different direction now. Like,
it is.
The age of the car salesperson, I think there's a definite time limit on it as it stands right now.
There is. I mean, for me, it was 20 years.
Right. But I mean, just as a profession.
Yeah. No, it's definitely changed. I mean, quite frankly, from the time that I got in the car business initially, which would have been sometime around 2001, to when I got out for a brief period, went back, finished my degree, and then got back into the car business in 2009, it had changed tremendously. And then from 2009 to 2021, I mean, the evolution in that 12-year span was just incredible with, the transition of the business as a whole to more internet and, more of an e-commerce style of business, and adapting your way of doing business to the way people truly want to do business was a lot. So, and I think we, Sonic Automotive, which, you and I both worked for, great company, large company, but I think they recognized that in the early days of, around 2010, 2011, 2012, really started to look at that and try to figure out, how to change the way people buy cars to make it fit more in line with how they want to buy cars, not how the dealer wants them to buy cars.
They were seeing the CarMax model. They were. And they wanted to apply it to, what if we could do this for new cars?
Yeah.
And price them fairly. I mean, typically they were about 5-10% off of sticker price, whatever the market would bear. And it was, for volume brands, it made sense. For luxury brands, it's like, well, you still could start from sticker if you really wanted to, but
and I mean, in the luxury brand, like, when we worked for Mercedes, a discount on Mercedes might be 1%, where, to your point, on a Honda, it may be 8 or 10 or, gosh, even sometimes 12-15% off. So, it really just depends. But yeah, that brand in itself, I think, allowed a little bit less of a negotiation up front because of supply and demand and, the brand itself. So
it was odd because going from Honda to Mercedes, I thought was going to be a challenge, but it was one of the best things I had ever done.
Yeah.
And it was amazingly so much easier.
Yeah, it was.
Right?
But the people,
they could actually buy the car.
Yeah. I remember a good friend of mine that owns some dealerships. He and I've been friends for years. But after I transitioned from Honda to Mercedes, I remember him calling me, and I was driving down the road, and he was like, "Matt West." I said, "What's up, Jack?" He said, "I heard that you went to Mercedes." And I said, "Yes." He said, "My God, man, that's worse than club and baby sales." And I was like, and I kind of laughed about it, but I got there and it was just so much different than what I thought it was going to be. The consumer was, so much more laid back. You're dealing with a different type of clientele.
Yeah.
When you're in that space, as opposed to, Honda or a Toyota or a Nissan dealership where there's 7 or 8, within a 20 mile radius. generally there's only one or two of a luxury brand within the radius. So it wasn't as cutthroat. You weren't dealing with, and the people, just generally speaking, were a little bit nicer. You're dealing with a little upscale clientele, a little bit more laid back. It wasn't, I thought I was going to be dealing with a bunch of pretentious people, and that was the opposite of what I dealt with. Yeah. I met some awesome people.
As did I.
So,
of course, you had people that were bougie.
Well, you did. Yeah. I mean, that's honestly, you run into those with Honda people, though.
True. Very true.
My favorite was, the person that would come in, and look down their nose at you and, treat you like you're, less than because, you're working at a Honda dealership. But it's like, you pull their credit bureau and you're like, okay.
Yeah. Obviously.
And I see your application, your income, and yeah, okay. All right. That's how you want to treat me. That's fine.
One of our cohorts that we worked with, Car Dog, he says that's the thing about cops and car salesmen is the fact that we always find out the truth.
Yes.
And I'll never forget when he said that. I'm going, you're actually right. Because, I mean, you bare your soul pretty much when you're buying a car. You're going to find out all the stuff.
Oh, yeah.
The skeletons.
Yeah. You literally see into someone's life.
Yeah.
I mean, I can hold somebody's credit bureau and tell you their life story just by looking at their credit bureau for the past 7 to 10 years.
Now, I never made it that far where I was doing like F&I and stuff like that. I got out before that.
You're lucky.
I don't know if I was lucky. I mean, I just, we had, it was a different story for me. I just didn't, I just wanted to get back to a steady paycheck, and it was my transition out into what I'm doing now. Yeah. It had to happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
I got what I got out of the business. I learned what I needed to learn, and I'm applying it pretty much every day today.
Yeah.
It teaches you to be really self-sufficient. It's the most perfect business in a box. If you want to learn about business, great business to go in, because you're going to learn about marketing and selling ad infinitum. I believe that's the term. I could be wrong.
If it's not, it sounded good.
Yeah, thank you. But you're also not going to have to deal with HR or inventory and stuff like that. So a lot of that's taken care of, because you can literally build a business inside of a business in that business.
That's what we used to tell people when we hire them. It's like you're a business within a business, and how hard you work and how you can. When I used to hire people in the car business, I would say, you've probably have you interviewed at, other dealerships, or do you plan on interviewing at other dealerships? And everybody would almost say yes, or, I'm about to. And I'd say, chances are I could probably tell you how that interview went and how that conversation went. Mm-hmm. Everybody in the car business is going to tell you you're going to make $100,000 a year selling cars.
Yeah, it's possible.
I'm not going to tell you that. I'm not going to tell you they're going to make $100,000 a year selling cars. I'm going to tell you that you have the potential to do that.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is it depends on how hard you work and how much you put into it, on how successful and how much money you will make.
Yeah.
Because essentially you are going to be a business within a business. We're going to train you and coach you and do everything we can to get you up to speed. But there's not going to be someone there holding your hand all day, every day, making sure that you're on task and doing the things that you need to do to be successful. That's going to be up to you.
Yeah.
And the most successful people that I worked with in the car business were generally self-starters that, if they didn't understand the business, could be explained the business or taught, coached, and trained, and then would just say, okay, I understand what I need to do. Now I'm just going to go work really hard and be successful. And you being one of those people, I watched the switch flip, so to speak. It's like, okay, when you truly understood it and you grasped the business, then you went on to sell cars, but then there was a point where it clicked with you and you were like, okay. And then you really kind of took off and ran with it. So, there's that transition. Some people come in, they just never get it.
They never get it. Well, it's also deciding to see it as a career, not a job.
Yeah.
You get a lot of those people. I kind of, not lamb-based managers from the car business on here, but, I see I am empathetic to their plight, but when it comes to creating healthy cultures inside the car business, it's a very difficult thing to do. And they do a lot of things that they don't need to do. It's like, you don't need to treat people like this. You know the dealerships that are out there that every month they fire the bottom 3 performers and stuff like that. And, some of the bigger, more volume dealerships that are around the country at one point in time, that literally happened.
Oh, yeah.
They would look at the bottom 3 performers and you're out. It's like, you're not building the culture that way, man. People are driven by fear.
Oh yeah.
At that point.
I remember at the end of every month, like in the early days of the car business, at the end of the month, after you'd wrap the month up, like everybody would dress really, really nice for work, like day 1, 2, and 3, because, there's a possibility they may not have a job at the end of the day, 1, 2, 3, or 4 or 5 when they're closing the month out, depending on how the month went. It's like, they'd have nice clothes on in case they need to go down the street and pop in front of the, GM or dealer operator and do an interview. So it's like you could always tell who was on skids by who wore a suit in like the first 4 or 5 days of the month.
That's funny. That's funny.
So anyway, yeah, the car business was wild, man. I learned a lot. I always tell people that, it was a very, very gratifying business for me. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about business. I learned a lot about people.
Yeah.
And I made a very good living doing it. And I was blessed in that way, that I was able to do that. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting business for those who have not been in the car business or been around it. If you ever want a crash course in life and business, then that's the space to go check out.
It's definitely something that if you need to do it and you want to you could make overnight money. You could make a $10,000 paycheck in a month if you just show up, you apply yourself, you listen. I equate it to, I look back on it and I equate it to voiceover. A lot of my voiceover students that hire me for coaching, I say, this is all about fundamentals and applying the different fundamentals and emulation and listening and stuff like that until you find your own voice, literally in that sense. But in the sales game, that's what it was the fundamentals and the awkward feeling and the fumbling around the fundamentals until you mastered them and they became second nature. Then it became just applying your own voice to it. That's how it was for me. I got to the point where with Mercedes, it was going from a narrow offering from Honda, very easy to understand, LX, EX, EXL, so on and so forth, to Mercedes where it was like, oh my gosh, option city.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of the fundamentals down and I was figuring out my voice at the time. I left in the middle of a September or December at the time, and it was like the stupidest thing. But anyway, that's what happened. And I knew how to sell cars, but it was like, I am selling a different beast here. Yeah. And I spent the first 15 days, they wouldn't let me be on the floor to sell until I took all the courses and stuff like that. Yeah. Honda, they just go out on the floor and try it.
Yeah.
Man. Yeah. Yeah. Cover your courses later and make sure you get them done. But I mean, you were one of the people for me that, I think there was always like, with the newbies, I'm not going to memorize your name until you're here for a month or two, right? Which is understandable because you're dealing with transient people a lot of the time, right? Culture certainly plays into that, but you were definitely one of the people. I think we had a very introspective conversation once upon a time, and from there we were just golden, right? And I think I had that with Rick, but Rick was just, he was surface level, just
he was gruff.
A delightful curmudgeon. There was a guy, just so those of you listening, we had 3 guys at the desk. They always have a tower, so to speak. And, you'd bring the deals to the managers, and some of the more seasoned salespeople would be like, okay, get me my numbers. And they just know what to do. With us newbies, it was what they called loading your lips. Yeah. And I understood that at 37. Yeah, I don't know what I don't know. Yeah. Just tell me what to say, and I'd figure out my own comfortable way to say it. Rick was really good at that. You were good with philosophy for me. A lot of the things that you told me were just very impactful, and I still remember them to this day. So thank you for that.
What was the most impactful?
I'm trying to remember. We prefaced this podcast with talking about whiskey. So yeah, that might be having a little bit of brain fog contribution right now.
Yeah. Rick was he was steady Eddie. I mean, he was always there, always reliable. But I used to always tell new guys, Rick Quarles is an acquired taste.
Yeah. And he and I we got along famously.
No, he did. Anybody that would stay for any period of time that would get past like the initial, hurdles of the car business. And, once you were, 60 days, 90 days in, and it's like, okay, this guy's going to make it. Yeah. then I would watch Rick break that wall down and become more, personable with that individual and start to, but usually by that time he had them trained pretty well to where it was like, they knew exactly what was expected, when they would come to the desk and work and deal with Rick Quarles. So.
Could you see like how salespeople would shape their approach, like what managers they would go to first?
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's, depend on how quick you want to get a deal done. Right.
Right. Because you were doing, at that time, used cars, which is a monster of a job. You were a used car manager.
I was. Yeah.
And, going back to did you listen to the Steve Brink episode when I had him on?
I did.
Wasn't it good to hear his voice?
I love that man. He is a national treasure to me. He, other than my dad, who, was very influential with me in the car business and coming up in the car business, but other than my dad, Steve Brink was my mentor in that space. Brian Palmer, a little bit as well. Brian was kind of more on the background of it because Steve and Brian had worked together for so long. But once Steve Brink and I had the first conversation, he said, I need a used car director for the Honda store. Actually, he said, I either need a used car director in F&I. And I said, there's not enough money for me to go back into F&I. I'd rather starve.
Right.
And he said, used cars it is. And I'd never done used cars at the time. So he knew there was going to be a little bit of a learning curve. But, I respected that guy. He talked to me in a way that things made sense.
Yeah.
And the conversations that we would have and just the way that he would, talk about, his life and the business and people and, the things that he used to say, I thought, this is what I've been looking for in the car business because I worked for some less than stellar characters in the beginning.
And there are a lot of them.
Yeah. But once I came to work for Sonic and was working with Steve, he was such a good guy and he was just so, he poured himself into his people. He was one of those guys, either you're, filling somebody's cup or you're taking away from it. And I felt like he was truly the first person in that business that I found that was constantly filling my cup.
Yep.
And it was just, so many great things to say about Steve Brink. I truly, and he and I still talk all the time.
Yeah.
I reach out to him from time to time. He'll call me, but we still stay in contact. And I will until, both of us are gone. So
yeah, he's definitely one of those guys that you have managers throughout life, you're either working for somebody and stuff like that. You're going to talk about the really good ones and probably the really bad ones,
Yeah.
Those are the people that are most memorable. And the people that are kind of in the middle, you don't talk about them.
Yeah.
Steve Brink comes up a lot, for me.
He does, and he should, because he did it the right way. And, one of the things that he told me, as a young manager, I'll never forget it. There was a salesperson that, kept pushing back. And finally one day I snapped at him a little bit, and I guess he went and had a conversation with Steve. Steve called me in his office one day and he said, hey, Bo, he called everybody Bo. Yeah. Hey, Bo, let's have a talk real quick. Yeah. So anyway, so I went in his office, we sit down and he said, let me ask you a question. I said, yes, sir. He said, if I had to choose, I think there was 26 or 27 salespeople at the time. He said, if I had to choose 26 of them or one of you, who do you think I'm going to choose? And I knew exactly when he said that, I was like, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And he made a point there. Like the people are the most valuable asset to him. It wasn't the cars and the building and the marketing. And it was truly about the people.
Yeah.
And when he said that, and then one of the things that he always used to say that I've carried with me over the last, when I meet Steve 15 years ago is, surround yourself with good people and your success will come.
Yeah.
It's all about surrounding yourself with good people. And that I truly feel like that's what Steve did with his life. And that was part of his success.
He attracted good people.
He did.
Yeah.
He surrounded himself. He would hire somebody and again, pour into them, add to their cup and make them the best in the business, you know, to where they understood the business, but they also understood the people and how to treat the people, whether it was your coworkers, whether it was the clients, whatever it was, but just, he always used to say it's a relationship business. Selling is a transference of feelings.
That's what, I remember that.
So, I mean, there's so many good, Steve Brink things from over the years that I still use and that I've carried with me and I'll carry with me until, like I said, I'm no longer here. So God bless
you, one of the things that you asked before about what were the things that you taught me, you were the one that said, look, if it's not on paper, it doesn't matter, and, those were some of the things that I just, over the time that I was there, I had to learn. I'm like, oh, that makes sense. You just don't know what you don't know. Mm-hmm. And there's an element that I guess my personality elicited out of you guys that was, I don't know, maybe I kind of urged you guys or compelled you guys to treat me differently because I had a way of conducting myself that, I was 37, but a lot of the people you're probably dealing with were in their 20s, early 20s, trying to figure out life, who they are. I had already been through that, you know. I was trying to figure out like a reinvention of myself at that time. And knowing full well that these guys know I'm Brink's friend, I've always been here shooting video and stuff like that in the radio aspect of what we did, because that's where he and I became very friendly, was from the radio business. And he, I knew that going in, like, these guys just think that he's doing me a favor and just bringing me on and plugging me in just to plug me in. And I deserve some sort of special treatment because of that. And I got to overcome that, and it was one of those things that I think you and I, there was a little bit of a wall there, but over time, I think you were the first wall that came down the quickest, if that makes sense. And I appreciate that because there was a lot of learning to be done, and it was profound. Mercurial being the first one. He and JC were very influential in how I approached things. And it was always like, approaching the desk was like, oh crap.
Now that would have been when JC Mercurial, that was when I was GSM, and then JC was the floor manager and Mike was used car manager, right?
Mike was floor manager when I came on board. Okay. You were used cars. Jason wasn't there. I remember Jason. I think he had been a Cadillac at that point.
Oh, Jason Harvey. Yeah, he was in F&I.
Yeah. Mo was the remember Mo?
Maurice Watt.
Yeah. He was another guy that I had to kind of posture to.
Yeah.
And I tell that story a lot. And if I run into him, he's actually on the hunt for a gig right now, and I got to reach out to him and tell him to come by my BNI and say, hey, dude, at least give it a shot and put yourself out there. But he's one of those guys that I understand it. It's like, okay, are you in it for the long haul, or am I going to waste my time here?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think Mo had been doing it for a really long time, and he kind of came up in that old, 70s, 80s. 90s,
the good old days.
Business, the good old days where
before the internet ruined everything.
Yeah. It was like working in the car business at that time was almost like fraternity. You were going to get hazed.
Yeah.
Like, it was not going to be easy. I mean, I remember my first job in the car business, there was a bunch of guys I knew from my hometown that worked there. And one in particular was the floor manager, and he always used to bag on how everybody dressed. Mm-hmm. And I remember I went out and bought like some new clothes, new shirts, new pants, new ties, and I, put my outfit together and thought that I was just absolutely kidding. I probably was. I mean, I felt like I looked pretty sharp and got compliments I was sharp. And then I walked in and he was just like tore me down to the ground about my new outfit. And I was just like, but he and I are the best of friends to this day. And, it's just, it was a lot of, people always ask me, if I miss the car business or what I miss about the car business. I always said there are a ton of things that I said, there are a few things that I really miss about the car business: the camaraderie, the banter, the pace in which the business moves, the instant gratification of, they always say, eat what you kill. And it was like, you kill and eat immediately. Mm-hmm. But there are also a lot of things that I don't miss about the business, which is, the time constraints, the quality of life schedule, all those things. But I truly miss and really enjoyed just kind of the camaraderie of, because it's almost like a fraternity, if you will, with, men and women and old and young, but it's just like a melting pot of a bunch of different people that are, in the same boat together, doing the same thing. You're there for, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 hours a day some days, depending on what your schedule looks like. But you spend more time with those people than you do with your friends or your family at that point. So it becomes a family. Yeah. And that's one of the things that I missed.
I do. I understand that. And you don't know until you know, being on the inside of that business.
Yeah.
But you weren't always doing that. You did power sports at one point, right?
I did. Yeah. So like probably 05 through 08.
Yeah. So was that kind of like telling your dad, look, I didn't go into the car business. I'm in the power sports business.
Yeah. I mean, I did the car business for like, 4 years, worked for a Honda store, worked for a Toyota store. And I was just like, at the end of the day, I just don't know if this is what I truly want to do, long term.
So that was your foot out the door moment.
Yes. I actually left the car business. I was playing golf one day and my phone rang and I looked down, didn't recognize the number, played a few more holes, rang again. I was like, same number. So I answered it. It was a guy that worked at a power sports dealership. He was like, hey, what are you doing? I was like, I'm playing golf. He's like, no, seriously, like what, like for a job, what are you doing right now? I was like, nothing right now. I've taken some time off.
Yeah.
I'm actually, just playing a lot of golf. And he was like, well, hey, when you finish up your round, why don't you pop by and talk to me? So I knew this guy he worked for my dad in the car business selling cars. So I stopped by the power sports dealership. I walk in, he's wearing a pair of board shorts, like Hawaii flowered board shorts, t-shirt, flip flops. And I walked in, I was like, hey, how you doing? He's like, doing good. I was like, are you off today? And he was like, no. I was like,
very informal.
You're the sales manager here. He's like, yeah, this is not the car business. Like this is so laid back. This is how we dress. We come into work from 9 to, 6 o'clock or whatever it was, half day Saturday. I was like, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So he basically just reeled me right into that. He's like, this is so fun. Like, we come in, we get our work done, the sales are good, commission's good. Like you're going to make a good living, but we have fun. Like, after work, we'll hop on our bikes, go for a ride. We, do weekends out in the woods on ATVs and motorcycles. And, it's, we got boats, so, we'll go out the lake and wakeboard, after work sometimes. I was like, okay, this is like more, I was young at the time. I was like 20, gosh, how old was I in 2000?
You're still young, by the way.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I was really young then.
Yeah.
And that really appealed to me. So I did that, sold for a little while, another dealership, one of the competitors in town. I went to work for them. Became the GSM and then became the GM of the dealership. And that was my first real management experience,
right,
in any kind of like retail sales. And I was able to I felt like I did a good job at that. And then that allowed me the opportunity to leave that, go back to school, finish my degree. And then in 2009, when I graduated, I basically started back at the ground level, sold cars for a little while, and then kind of worked my way up from there to.
Before all that started, though, and it's coming to mind as we're talking, you told me, actually, that conversation that we had where we had a little bit of a stalemate.
Yeah.
And I said, hey, can I talk to you? And we went into Steve's office. You actually gave me the background because I went into I think I went into interviewer mode like I normally do because I came out of radio. Yeah. And I started asking you questions. And you were telling me that you grew up before your dad got into the car business, almost impoverished, right?
Oh, yeah.
And it was like,
yeah.
The car business was an answer to, oh my gosh, this is the other side of life.
It is.
Right?
It is. Yeah. I mean, there was 5 of us living in a 2-bedroom house. My sister slept in the laundry room.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we had nothing.
Yeah.
Then my dad got the car business, was very successful there, sold cars, F&I, like I said, worked his way up. And I mean, we had, beautiful home, cars, boats.
How old were you when that happened though?
I think I was like 7 at the time. So, I was,
You remember years of struggle, though.
Yeah. I mean, I remember the first, probably, from like 4 or 5 years old, 6, 7, just, living in a small house, not having a lot, sharing a bicycle, stuff like that. It was just like, I didn't know how underprivileged we were, I think, until later on in life when we started, having nice things and being able to go places and do things. I was like, okay, this is like the early years of my life. I remember that it's, this is much better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So but do you remember like your dad being not around as much during those years?
Yeah. I mean, once he got in the car business, I mean, he worked a lot. I mean, he was, 12, 14 hours a day. So, he'd leave early in the morning, he'd get home, 7:30 at night and, we'd have dinner and, we'd go to bed and he'd stay up for a little while, go to bed, get up, do it the next day. So, yeah, I mean, he put a lot into it. I mean, he poured his heart and soul into the car business to make it work, to provide for us.
Yeah.
And was successful.
Which is something that just a man does,
Yeah. I mean, he's, true definition of a man was my dad. I mean, he just, whatever he could do to give us a better life, that's what he did.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And it's, how did he get into it? Was it by accident? What was he doing before that?
He did a lot of different things. I think he was driving a petroleum truck previous to that. Yeah. Making fuel deliveries.
Right.
For a friend of his that owned a petroleum company in town. Prior to that, he was an engineer at a prison.
Yeah.
He had a lot of not very good jobs before he had a good job, paid a good living.
Do you remember if he had kind of like a foot out the door kind of moment going into the car business?
No, I don't think he ever did. He had friends. He had friends that were in the automotive business, which is kind of what prompted him to get in, and seen that they worked really hard and was successful, and had money and nice things. And I think he was like, okay, this is a way for me to provide for my family. And that was the motivation. So
there's a lot of different things that happened to me in that business. One that does come to mind. Speaking of Steve Brink, I know I'm jumping all over the place, but
no, you're good.
There was a time, I think, that first couple of months, it was like, what the hell did I get myself into? And going from that to, I'm really liking this. And then 5 minutes later, what the hell did I get myself into? And I had one of those moments where I think I went a couple of days where I blinked, and I popped into his office and I said, dude, I don't know if I made a mistake or what. He's like, wow, what happened? I told him, I said, I got a mortgage that's coming due, blah, blah, blah. And I don't know what, typical kind of thing. And he just, how he would just kind of sit there and just kind of look at you and listen and nod his head.
Yeah.
And eventually, I stopped saying what I was saying, and he goes, so what the F you going to do about it?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I got it.
Steve had a way.
Good talk.
Steve had a way about him. Talking about Steve, I remember he used to, he'd call me in his office. He'd say, do you have any clue why you're sitting here in my office in front of me right now?
You hate those rhetorical questions.
And and he used to say, the last time we had this conversation, I thought it was going to be
the last time
we had this conversation. But no, I love the fact he would sit and let you talk, and just to your point, he would absorb it and listen to everything that you had to say.
Yeah.
And then, then he would give it to you like a man.
Yep.
You
had to hear it.
You did.
Because my dad died in 2006. So, a lot of my formative years into a career, so to speak, were already done. I had a mentor going into radio who taught me all about the business and stuff like that. But then when it was time for me to get out, it was just, a reinvention. There's a whole theory that I have when people get into their 40s, like that transition from 30 to 43, 37 to 43. I think a lot of people go through a transition. I think the 20s, from 20 to 40, are sometimes the most difficult portion and most miserable part of people's lives, because there's so many expectations. They don't know who they are yet, but they know that I got to get married. I got to do this. I got to have kids. I got to make this amount of money. I got to have a career. By the time, it's like all this pressure. And then you realize that in your late 30s, none of that crap mattered. I have not figured myself out, So I had done just the opposite. I knew radio was my path.
Yeah.
But it kind of played itself out. I kind of got it out of my system, as my father would tell me. He's like, you're like me. You need to get it out of your system. So I did. And then what do I do next? Brink was always the one in the radio station. Hey, anytime you want to come over and make $100,000 a year. I was like, yeah, sure. And the time came, and that's when I made it. It was one of the best moves, man. But it was one of those things that it taught me a lot about leadership and working for good people, because if you walk into a place and you see that healthy culture and you can feel it, it's a feeling you get. That's because of the management. And when that management pops out and it's replaced by another, it's going to attract, and that culture will shift. We've all seen that. What did you learn? I would imagine, of course, from Steve, but what were some of the top 3 things about leadership that you've learned overall?
Yeah, I think, one was like the the progression of what we used to call the leadership ladder.
Yeah.
And, trying to get to the top rung, which was the treasured leadership, where, essentially, we always talk about, following a guy into a burning building. That's when you hit that rung of the ladder, that treasured leadership, then that is the true meaning of the word. I mean, if Steve Brink would have said, hey, follow me into this burning building, we have to save people, then I would be scared, but trust his leadership enough to know that this is what we need to do, and he's going to take care of me. And that was, I think, one of the most important things that I took away from the time that he and I were together. I think too is just how to treat people, how to be a good leader, how to listen and empathize with people. I think I wasn't very empathetic, I think, before I met Steve.
Right.
I think I was very transactional as a leader. I think, that's just kind of who I was. I was very
thing about maturity as well.
Structured. Yeah, I was very structured, very organized, very regimented in what I did and what my process was and the things that I was responsible for. And a lot of what I did didn't necessarily require people as a young used car manager. So I think, again, I think I had a process in line that was, when he hired me, I'd never done used cars, and we set 33 records in 36 months in used cars.
Yeah.
And it was all because of Steve's leadership, his guidance, his tutelage. But also I put a process together that was just like rock solid on top of Sonic's process and how I did things. And again, I think I was just kind of in my own little bubble, not thinking about the next steps of my career, what it looked like after a used car manager to GSM and then eventually a GM dealer operator role. But I was just very transactional. And I think one of the things that he taught me is like, you need to, be a little bit more emotionally available. Yeah. People centric.
Yeah.
But I think that was very important. And then I think probably the last and maybe the most important thing that I learned from Steve, as a human being and as a leader, was just the love that he had for not just his family, but people in general.
Yeah.
And I think, he did that each and every single day. And that was very important for me to watch him just really take care of people, and just really be a good steward of people in the relationship. So,
my wife and her intuition, I don't know if you're aware of that, but she is a very intuitive person. The minute she meets somebody, she either knows if she's going to like them or not immediately. And he was one of those people that she just always liked.
Yeah.
I even took a picture of him when we were last together on the podcast. We went and grabbed lunch. I took a selfie of us in the car and sent it to her. And she's like, oh my, she doesn't typically do that for people, but he was one of those guys. I'm telling you, I know we talk a lot about Steve on the podcast, especially with people that I bring on that we've worked with him before. There's a reason for that. Yeah. He is very influential still. And he just did it the right way. He could do a whole course on how to create a healthy culture, and I think he should. I think I actually told him that.
What's crazy is we talk about transitioning, and Steve transitioned out of the car business in
3 months when I was there.
Yeah,
I was like, dude, really? Crying out loud.
Yeah. 3 months in.
Not for you. You had the opportunity to work for him for several years.
Yeah. What was crazy was he promoted me to GSM, and then like 3 weeks later told me he was leaving. I was like, oh, wow.
Dude.
Okay. Yeah. But yeah, he transitioned out, and I think that, him transitioning out and taking the opportunity he did to get into the Monk's Home Improvement. Yeah. Bath and kitchen remodel.
Of all things.
But I think, going back, and I don't know if Steve covered this on the podcast. I can't remember. I watched it, but he and Ty every night would hop online and play games together and chat about, Ty's business. Steve actually helped Ty understand sales and really kind of build his business up and grow his business.
Yep.
And then when it came time where he wanted to switch from painting to home remodeling and kitchens and baths, he was asking Steve, how, if you were going to do this, like, how would you do it? And those conversations led Ty to say, hey, will you come up here and do this with me? And I know it was a big leap of faith for Steve, because Steve was making a small fortune, running that Honda store downtown. And for him to walk away from that, to go try something new in a completely different industry and basically build a business from the ground up, is courageous in my opinion. Because he had it made. He could have stayed in the car business for the rest of his career, made, a ton of money, set his family up for life and been fine. But, I think he truly felt like he had a bigger calling, and to go do this thing and work alongside a guy that he's known for, they came up in the Navy together.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So they were both in the Navy, and I think that's how they met. I may be talking out of turn here, but I'm pretty sure that's how it happened. He left, Murfreesboro, Tennessee, uprooted his family, moved to New Jersey, partnered with Ty, basically started this business from the ground up and did things completely different. The way that they were doing business, or the way that they started doing business, was completely different than whatever everybody else wanted. A retainer, to come out and do quotes and all this. He was like, we'll do free estimates.
Yeah.
And that took off, and that market, like, wow. It caught on like wildfire. Everybody's like, you're going to come do a quote for free? Yeah. And they just absolutely started, and they have grown that business, and he is way more successful doing that than he, I think, ever could have possibly have been, nothing short of owning his own stores in the car business. But it's to your point, it was that, he's just that person that's going to come in, create a culture, show you how to do things, work alongside of you, groom you, train you, coach you, build you up, and make you the absolute best you that you could be. Yeah. And he was really good. And he's basically carbon copied that, done that in that industry, and just absolutely killing it. So,
do you know how old he is? Was he in his 50s?
He is, I think he's 7 years older than me, 7 or 8 years older than me. So I'm not going to tell my age, but
right.
Well, I think I'm going to now. He's like mid-50s.
Mid-50s, because I remember finding out how old he was. I'm like, oh my gosh, he's that much older than I am.
No.
I'm like, I'm way behind.
But just seemed in a conversation like he was so much older than me, just because he was so wise.
Right.
But I think, kind of to point back to, you mentioned Brian Palmer. Brian Palmer was a big influence on Steve Brink.
Right.
Which I worked for Brian as well. Those two guys, other than...
They were culture creators, healthy culture creators. Because here's the thing: is that there were people that were there for a long time. Mm-hmm. You'd see the same faces in those dealerships, and that's like a lot of what the dealership world contends with now. I bring this analogy up all the time. If you want to take the temperature, if you're buying a car, go to that dealership's About Us page and find the team page. Yeah. And if there's a lot of blank spaces, or if there's even is a team page, red flags should be going up, because that is very telling. Either they're churning through people where they can't keep up with the pictures and photos. If there's a team page that looks like it's established, and you can tell that, maybe the nature of the people are much more seasoned looking, rather than young, that should tell you everything. Okay. Yeah. And if you go into that dealership and it feels like they've been there a while, to me, that's a good management staff. Yeah. And that's what Steve had. He had a lot of longevity of his employees there. He did. You being one of them, Rick certainly being one of them, Mike being one of them, Angel. She went down to Florida to follow Brian.
Yeah, she worked with Brian in Deerfield Beach for,
until
Brian retired. Brian retired, I think, 2 years ago.
Yep. Well, she's still with that dealership.
She is, yeah.
Because of the family, because Darren's there.
Yeah, Darren's still there.
Yeah. But moving on, getting out of the business, transitioning. The reason why I asked about Steve, so if he's about 5 years older than me, so right around that time, he was in that window that I talked about, 37 to 43.
Yeah.
He was about 42, 43 at the time when he made that decision to leave. Yeah. He reinvented himself. Isn't that crazy? It just dawned on me.
I did almost the exact same thing. Really? I left the car business in 21, so I would have been 43 at the time.
Right. You just told everyone your age, but
Yeah, it's fine. It's okay at this point. I embrace it. I've been told by people, they may be lying to me, that I don't look this old. So, but anyway,
it's, I probably do, but whatever. No, you don't look that old.
You look great.
You still have like the full color of your beard and hair.
Yeah.
Brooke.
Anyway. I'm starting to get more and more gray. But no, I mean, I remember coming home, from a day at the car business, and my wife had transitioned a few years back. She was very successful in the advertising marketing world in radio.
Yeah,
worked
that's
for,
right.
Radio and was wildly successful doing that. And then she transitioned and got into the finance industry, and started out as like a desk customer service representative, and then assistant to the financial advisor. I forget what all the acronyms that they use, but then she, got her Series 6, her Series 7, 9, 10, 63, 65, and then her CFP, and now she's a financial advisor. And when she was talking about transitioning out of advertising, we were talking about what's next, and she was like, I don't know. So she thought about it for a while, and I told her, here's the deal. Whatever you do, go find something that you love, something that makes you fulfilled.
Yeah.
And do that, regardless of what that looks like. Be happy doing what you're doing. And she did. She ended up, going down the road of, banking and finance, wildly successful at that now. And I remember coming home one night from the car business, and it was just, one of those ass kickers of a day, and I walked in, and she was making dinner. It was probably like 8:30 at night. And, she could just tell by the look on my face. She was like, what's wrong? I was like, just tired, Yeah. She was like,
it's run its course.
What do you mean by that? And I was like, I don't know how much longer I can do this.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, why do you?
Yeah.
And of course I said, money.
Right.
And she said, her being the financial advisor, she's like, don't worry about that.
Yeah.
I said, okay.
What do you want to do?
And she said, let me ask you that again. Why do you do this? And I said, well, it's all I've ever known.
Yeah.
And she said, what if you went and learned something different? And I was like, she said, do you remember a few years ago, the conversation that you and I had when I was transitioning out, and, and that's exactly what you told me. So how about you take your own advice?
Mm-hmm.
And that hit me, Jim, like a ton of praise.
Yeah.
She said, go find something that makes you happy, that makes you fulfilled.
Right.
And I didn't even know what to say. I looked at her and said, okay. So I walked in the next day, met with the GM dealer operator, told him I was resigning. Of course, don't, stay, and I was like, no, like I am done.
Mm-hmm.
And I walked out at that time, and I thought, I'm not real sure what's next, but whatever it is, I'm going to try something different. I'm going to put myself out there. I'm going to try to find, a different industry to go work in and find something that makes me happy.
Someone asks you that, do you immediately know the answer? That's a big component to that. Like, I've done this all my life because this is everything I've ever known. It's done well for us.
Yeah.
Is it kind of run its course? What would I do? That's a big question I ask people that are stuck in what they're doing.
Yeah.
Dude, what you always want to do when you were a kid? What's your dream job? You know? And are you at the point where you get to do that?
Yeah.
Have to versus get to.
Does your garage door sound like this? If it does, it's screaming for help. Call Incredible Doors, 931-348-DOOR. We're making garage doors in Murray and Williamson counties work better and sound better. We just make them incredible again. Go to IncredibleDoors.com or call 931-348-DOOR. Follow us on Facebook for specials on maintenance visits, keypads, and other items. 931-348-DOOR. IncredibleDoors.com.
Did you know immediately? Like, did you entertain any sort of childhood fantasy job that you maybe once wanted?
I thought about it. I thought, I initially started college and was going to get a finance degree and, basically do what my wife's doing. And she was like, well, you could, always go and get, you've got all the tangibles, you got all the experience, you can just go get your certifications. And I was like, I don't really know if I want to do that.
Yeah.
I had worked with a tech company when I was working in automotive that we had partnered with on, some inventory management tools that I had designed a process for that they implemented not just within their company, but nationwide.
Right.
So when they heard I left the car business, they reached out to me. It's like, hey, come to work for us. They were a company out of Arlington, Texas, a little startup, good business, good people. But I wasn't running car dealerships, but I was still in car dealerships every day. So I was working basically on the vendor side of things.
Right. Which
and
is
I realized
so much fun.
Yeah. I realized very quickly, I was like, okay, I'm still in car dealerships every day. So like, how did I get here? I was trying to get out of this. And the company I work for now reached out. We had a conversation. I met with who was the CEO at the time. And we met while I was down at the beach. We scheduled some time. Her and I hopped on a virtual call, had a great conversation. And when it ended, Nicole and I were talking. She said, how do you think that went? I said, I don't know. It's kind of weird. I said, either it's, we didn't really talk a whole lot about business. It was really about me and my life and, just, a bunch of ephemeral stuff,
Yeah.
So, I really don't know how it went. Either she did that just to, appease me and not ask me business questions so she could get away from me, or like she's just a really good person. And if it's the latter, if it's the really good person, like I think that I definitely would be interested in working for this company. So a couple of weeks passed, they called me back in. I met with her and a couple of the executive sales directors. Had a really good conversation with them. They put a package together. She actually called me before they sent the offer letter over, to have a conversation with me about what the contents were, what the structure was, which I thought was really cool. In the same time frame, the company that I was working for at the time, the tech company, was putting together a offer letter to give me a promotion in a different role. So I had both kind of on the table. Plus, there was also a dealership in town that was trying to court me as well. So I had options. I knew that the dealership option was going to be the last one because I really just did not ever want to go back to the car business. But when we talked on the phone and she was going through the offer, it just felt different. It felt right. Yeah. So, we hung up the phone. Nicole and I talked about it. It was 4th of July weekend. We talked about it over the weekend. And I said, I'm going to go to work for this company. We both agreed, her and I both agreed that this was the right move for me to make. And so I started with the company as a broker, kind of an entry-level position. So broker, then became a regional sales director, and then I became the vice president of sales. And then this last year, we went to lunch, and she sat me down and said, hey, I'm going to be stepping down, and we want you to be the CEO of the company. And to say I was shocked was an understatement. I mean, I was just absolutely floored. I was, so humbled, so honored that, that they would consider me for that position to lead that company.
When I visited you about a month ago or so, it was really eye-opening because I had no idea that business even existed. And I even brought I brought it back to my business partner here, and I said, did you ever realize that these things you could actually buy roots?
I didn't even know it existed. I mean, I knew that because I had my best friend growing up worked for FedEx as a terminal manager. So I knew that the guy that delivered FedEx packages to my front door didn't necessarily work for FedEx, that there was contracts that for contracted delivery for those companies that do that on, FedEx's
I guess I was aware of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I had no idea.
I'm not that dense.
That there was
I looked to the camera there. So,
I had no idea there was an industry or a world where, these businesses are transacted between buyers and sellers. So that's essentially what our company does. So Route Consultant, is the company I work for now. And we are a brokerage and consulting firm. We broker businesses in the logistics space. Mainly, we do several different when I got there, we were just doing FedEx and a little bit of Amazon, but now we've diversified our company. We do FedEx, we do Amazon, we do some stuff in the bread space. We have a big partnership with the third largest bread distributor in the U.S. that we exclusively sell their bread routes. We do a little bit in EMS, non-emergency medical. We do some waste stuff. So we've diversified our company a little bit here and there over the past 2-3 years. But yeah, I had no idea it even existed. So getting an opportunity to come in and learn a completely different industry, new things. I found it so interesting, and I feel like I caught on relatively quickly, just because I did have a basic understanding of kind of logistics. So, but selling,
right.
And we take these businesses, we'll look at them based on how they're currently operated. We'll, put together an evaluation on the business, work with the client to figure out what that looks like and what, based on the current market, what the multiple of the net operating income is. We'll sign a price, and then we go out and find buyers for these businesses. And then we help them, walk the path and transact this business. So, then we also do a ton of consulting. So, we were a firm that was built by contractors for contractors. So we know what it looks like to operate in the logistics space, and we've, been there and done that. And, we understand where all the skeletons are in the closet, so to speak, and what, the mistakes that you can make in that type of industry that can, make a huge impact on your bottom line, your net operating income is pretty measurable. So, helping people avoid those mistakes and, how to run their business efficiently and profitably, is, part of what we do.
I would think that the car business played into that, though. I mean,
it really did.
Yeah. What felt natural going into it?
Just the people aspect of it, because, sales is, back to what Steve used to say, it's a relationship business, transference feelings. So regardless of whether I'm selling cars or businesses or, whatever it may be, it's just, having a conversation with somebody, finding out what they're trying to accomplish, what their intentions are, what they want to get out of this, and then try your absolute level best to provide them with everything that they want, and try to help them through that process and make it comfortable.
Yeah.
And I think that that's part of the success that I had early on in this business, was just being able to have conversations, listen to people, repeat back, what their goals are, and then work with them alongside them to try to help them accomplish those goals.
Right.
And use that relationship aspect, and then the knowledge that I have of, what logistics businesses are and the how they should be operated, and the things that you need to pay attention to that'll cost you a lot of money, and, helping explain that to them to prepare them for their life as a logistics professional, as the owner of a route-based, business.
So a lot of those things, a lot of the people you're reaching out to, they're inquiring about either selling or buying a business. So you got to take one hat off and put another one on.
I mean, working with, sellers to, because a lot of these guys, they built these businesses from the ground up, and, when they get ready to exit the space, they're selling their legacy, and some people sell for different reasons. Some people look at it as an investment, and they've got, their ROI, and they're going to move on, or it's, somebody that's maybe retirement age, don't have a legacy to leave the business to, or, the kids don't want to, participate in the business. Maybe they do something else or whatever, and they're just ready to exit. We'll help them put together, what that should look like. And then we'll go source buyers for them.
Yeah.
And we'll vet those individuals. On the buyer side of it, it's, it's people like me and you, quite frankly. It's, people that have worked in business, or, business professionals, serial entrepreneurs or professional entrepreneurs, people that, maybe grew up in the logistics space or understand the logistics space, or maybe even worked as a driver, that said, hey, I think I could do this on my own. And they'll go out and purchase these businesses, and then, basically become an entrepreneur.
Right. So, is it kind of a turnkey thing? I would imagine that whenever you have these businesses to sell, you're helping them on the consulting side, dial in the processes, get the numbers kind of not zeroed in, but, focused before you can actually take it to market? And do you want the buyers to be as turnkey as possible depending on their involvement?
Yeah, I mean, we want them to understand the business prior to getting in. It's just going to make it easier.
So you're consulting not only on the selling end, but so somebody wants to buy, you want them to understand that business.
Yeah, I mean, we've got consulting services that we can sign them up for, that they'll pay for to basically learn, what that looks like. On the broker side, we primarily work with the seller, because we're representing as a broker, we're representing the seller of the business. But if you're a buyer that's interested in buying one of these, we'll provide you the information that we've, gathered and put together about the business for you to evaluate. And then if you decide that you want to get a little bit more in the weeds and really understand it and do the consulting route, you can do that. And then we'll assign a consultant to those individuals that will essentially help them throughout the process.
Yeah.
Even we've got several different products, but one is like the acquisition portion of it, how to smoothly acquire one of these companies. And then after the fact, we have, things, they'll help with profitability or their operations or whatever it is, we can help them maintain that business. But yeah, right. I mean, our job is to first and foremost, we're a marketing and education company. We want to educate and train as many people as we can that want to get into the space on, what it is before they enter the space.
Yeah.
So that they have a true understanding of, what this job that they're buying looks like. And not everybody's going to work in the business.
Yeah.
Some people are going to work on it. So not every individual that buys one of these businesses is going to insert themselves into the day-to-day operations. Some people are looking at it just from an investment standpoint. But for them to understand what all of this looks like prior to getting into that space.
Yeah. You also have, even in those businesses that you're representing, there are cultures, within, there's always going to be a culture, healthy or otherwise. Based on your experience, knowing what you knew from Steve and the car business and what worked and what didn't work, is that part of their consulting as well? I mean, I guess, anybody that's in a business that's in transition, being sold, it could be trepidatious. You got a lot of people like, oh my gosh, what's the new owner going to be like? And
yeah, that's tricky. And we do. I mean, we give people tips, how you can make it as smooth. We always say, we'll help transact these businesses, but when you're buying, essentially the contract, you're buying the trucks, but you're also getting the people along with it. But the people are assets, but not assets that you own.
Yeah.
They're assets that you're acquiring that you're going to have to maintain and keep. So, depending on how you treat those people in the beginning will dictate whether they stay or go. So, as a new owner, if I were to buy 7 or 8 bread routes, and my first day of acquiring that business, I'm going to bring everybody together and just say, hey guys, I understand this is a little bit of a transition. Some of you might be scared, but at the end of the day, we're going to get through this together. Here's my commitment to you guys.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I'm probably going to say, hey, I know you could probably go anywhere and get a job tomorrow, but I'd really like for you to stay with me. So I'm going to pay you a stay bonus.
Mm-hmm.
So after 60 days, I'm going to give you, X amount of dollars. And then maybe after, 120, 180 days, I'll give you, another, just to give me an opportunity so that somebody doesn't come and offer you, $2 more an hour. A lot of these delivery drivers get paid a daily rate, so it maximizes the efficiency. So, what I mean by that, I'll back up to kind of go forward on that. So if I'm going to pay somebody $15 an hour, and me as an individual, I need to make $150 a day, I'm going to take 10 hours to deliver.
Yeah.
Versus if I just tell you I'm going to pay you $150 a day, I'm probably going to get that job done in like 6 or 7 hours as efficiently and safely as I possibly can.
Right.
That way I've got more of my day. But for me, I mean, I would to help build that culture, because again, these people don't know you and they're scared. I mean, you're the new guy. You're not the devil they know, so to speak. But just doing something and saying, "Hey guys, I appreciate you. I want to work with you. We're going to work to make this business even better than what it is. We're going to grow it. More opportunities, all of that. But hey, I understand that again, you can probably go get a job for, a couple more bucks an hour, maybe 20, 30 more bucks a day or whatever it is. But if you'll stay with me, I'll bonus you, after a period of time. And then, after, whatever it is, 5-6 months, I'll give you, another bonus and that gives me an opportunity to prove myself and prove that my company culture is going to be good. You're going to enjoy working here. Everything's going to be okay.
Your life's going to be as minimally impacted as possible.
Yeah. And I think that's the goal of every entrepreneur when they buy these businesses, is to walk in and hopefully retain everybody and for nobody to leave. And that's difficult.
Yeah.
So
there's a lot of, in the radio business, when I got started, one of my program director at the time, Tom Bass, he said, if you ever get the opportunity to take a management job, program director or otherwise, he says, don't go in and be one of those guys that tries to put your fingerprints on everything right away. Yeah. He says, there was something that the previous guy, if they left on their own volition, they weren't escorted out of the building or anything. If they were doing something right, figure out what they were doing right and just build upon it. There's so many people that get into management positions. Now I'm here. And now I'm going to change things because I need to put my mark on stuff. I got to mark my territory, so to speak. Yeah. Is that part of I would imagine that's kind of your process of doing things. You want to improve upon previous successful SOPs, I guess you want to say. You get a lot of people that have I guess what I'm asking is ego versus practicality, right? We've worked for people that, stepped into a position and were like, oh, let me make it all about me.
Yeah, let me break all my toys.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. No, I mean, we recommend that once they do their thing, I mean, unless they hire us to continue to work with them on that side of things, they're going to go do what they're going to do. Right. But we do try to, set it up and just say, hey, the things that are working, hold on to that. Anything that you feel like is not working, then, pay attention to that. Or if you're looking at your, P&L and your wages are 70%, you're probably paying you guys a little bit too much. You need to pay attention to that. Or you've got, a situation where you're running way too many trucks on the road and you could scale that down and run less trucks and still deliver the same amount of units at a much lower cost basis. So, those are the things that you need to really be looking at. And if there's a world where you can improve, those things, then, that's going to be the difference in the efficiency and the profitability of your business, but don't do it at the detriment of your people necessarily, don't. So
what do you need currently? What are you looking to do? And are you looking to add to your team or get in front of more opportunities?
Yeah. I mean, I think, we're just going to continue to look at different, verticals or different silos, within the logistics space. And, if we feel like there's a world where we can go in and make an impact and help people and, bring awareness and education and training to that particular area and help people that, either are currently in that business and maybe aren't getting the ROI that they're looking for, to help them improve the efficiency and profitability of their business in that space, but also for new people that want to enter that space, give them an avenue or a conduit to do so, to help introduce them to that, give them as much of the knowledge and experience that we have, or we can translate to them so that it prepares them prior to them getting into that space so that they can be successful.
And by proxy, when you do all that, you're going to have to build your team a little bit more.
You are.
Right?
So right now, I mean, we've got some things on the horizon that we're looking at as a company, some things that we're talking about doing. Some new spaces that we're looking at getting into, but until we fully flesh those out and make a commitment to get into that space, then once we do that and kind of set up the education and training side of it and what that's going to look like and how we're going to inform people of this, and then we'll start to add people on. Yeah. We've done a lot of that over the past really 18 months since we started, 18 to 24 months since we started diversifying the business into other, verticals. So
getting out of the car business into this one, especially recently, as you've done.
Yeah.
What was the biggest eye-opening moment? What was a profound moment for you?
Just that first and foremost, this even existed.
Right.
But I think the most profound thing is the difference in quality of life.
Right.
Doing
Getting
this
your
versus
time
what I
back,
was doing
right?
for. Yeah. I mean, I work a lot, but I don't work like I used to.
Right.
I'm not required to be in a building chained to a desk for, some days it was, 12, 14, 16 hours a day. I mean, I remember, gosh, early in my career, there's mornings where Nicole could tell you I'd get up, 5 o'clock in the morning and leave the house at 5:45 because, we had a ton of cars over the weekend, had to get things prepped on a Monday morning or whatever. And then, I'd get home at, 10, 11 o'clock at night, some nights.
And then do it again the next day.
Yes. I mean, it's nothing like an 18-hour day, 18-hour day to truly humble you as a human being. It's like,
so good for a marriage.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was a whole different thing because when Nicole and I started dating, I was back in school, finished my degree. So I didn't have a job. I had all the time in the world. And then when we got engaged was when I finished school.
Yeah.
And then got back into the car business. So I remember, my mom sat Nicole down after we got engaged. And was like, hey, let me tell you a little bit about the car business. From being married to a car guy, this is what it looks like. There's going to be some late nights, a lot of late nights. You probably have to eat some meals by yourself. You'll go to, different events and parties and stuff like that by yourself. You'll maybe have to learn how to mow the yard or, weed eat or something like that. You're going to have to do, a few more things around the house. And like, if you're not good with that, you don't need to marry my son.
Right.
And, when Nicole first told me that, I was a little shocked that, my mom, I was a little appalled. I was like, holy cow, she's trying to scare her off or something. But I was like, no, she was truly setting the stage for what her life was going to be like and making sure that she was fully committed to that prior to us getting married.
That's a sales tactic. It's setting the expectation.
Mm-hmm.
Not enough people do that.
Yeah, she did that. And the first year or so that, I was, fully engulfed in the car business, there were some nights where, I'd get home late and she, I could tell she was miffed. And, we just sat down and talked about it. I point back to that conversation. And that I would assure her that, everything I was doing for us, that might not be comfortable now, but down the road, it's going to pay off for us. Or I hoped it would.
I remember you saying that, and that's I believe you put it as a means to an end.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And, that's one of the things that I remember you saying, and, to a certain extent, there's ends in seasons in life, but it just brings you to another season, and finding that purpose that fulfills you is what's key, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because I don't mind working as much as I do because I get to do what I do. I'm like straddling that have to get to component of what we're doing, Yeah. In the car business, I kind of felt like that too. And to credit to the car, I know we keep on going back to it. I keep in touch with more people from that business than I do in radio.
I do.
Isn't that nuts?
Yeah, I do too. I mean, I still talk to, I probably still talk to 24 people that I met throughout the years in the car business on a regular basis. Just because, again, when you're confined in a building, together for that long, you build those bonds. And, I mentioned earlier, the things that I miss is the camaraderie.
Yeah.
The banter, the relationships, the relationships that I made and the people that I met and the bonds that were formed will carry on a lifetime. You're one of those people.
Yeah.
You and I we've known each other for...
It's going on 12 years.
12 years, but I met you prior to that when you were in radio coming in and out of the store. We
were acquainted.
Acquaintances. But I think back to the first time I met you was... probably 14 years ago, 13, 14. Yeah, probably 14 years ago.
Yeah.
But you and I we worked together for what was probably a couple of years.
Mm-hmm. Because it was both at Honda and a Mercedes.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, even though we haven't worked together in a long time, we've stayed in touch over the years. Text or, phone calls or whatever.
Touching base, like no time
absolutely.
ever passed.
That's one thing my wife says. She said, a lot of the guys that, you're friends with and the people that, you've met over the years, she said, I find it amazing that, even even though it may be 5, 6, 8 years, since you've talked to that individual, when you guys get together, it's like no time has ever passed. And I'm just like, I love that, man. I love that type of bond and that type of relationship to where, you can have that.
Yeah.
Where you can go a long period of time without, and then just like pick right back up where you left off. So
it's given me a different perspective on radio as well, because I've had a few, not people I've worked directly with, but we all know each other. It's a very small world in radio. Because I got into podcasting fairly quickly, I never thought that my skill set in radio would ever be relevant again, especially not to this degree that it is now. Yeah. Because it's needed again. I'm completely blown away by that. And I'm like, hey, this is my superpower. Might as well go with it. But there are so many people being let go from radio now, because as the commoditization of the industry happened, they're finding that they just, they haven't nurtured the next generation of talent and that kind of thing. So a lot of these people are kind of, after years and years and years of working, are finding themselves being shown the door. And it's amazing the stories I hear, how little negotiation prowess these people have.
Yeah.
And it's like, of course you have, looking back on it is one thing. And if I had to do it over and over again, it would be like, oh no, yeah, we're not doing it this way. Yeah. I'm not signing your little paper until you pony up. And I know that this is your first pencil and we're going to have a couple of different volleys of this. Yeah. They just kind of accept it. And the funny thing is that one in particular, Johnny Bozeman, and we talked about it on the podcast. He was a longtime producer for Phil Valentine. And now he was shown the door recently. I reached out to him. We knew each other, never really worked together or anything. He came here. We had a great conversation. I said, dude, if I were you, I'd be like, oh, okay, that's fine. What's my severance? Oh, no, we're going to give you 3 months. Oh, no, you're not. I'm not doing any NDAs. I'm not doing any blah, 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 or non-competes until you pony up. Or I'm just going to go ahead and start my own podcast, and I'm going to start making phone calls to all your advertisers and start getting them over here.
Yeah.
And, give them a break on what they're currently spending, because I know they ultimately just wanted to work with me.
Yeah.
So have fun.
Yeah. That's funny you mention that, because the last company I worked for before I transitioned out of automotive, set this document, non-compete down in front of me. And it was just like, you can't
well, here we go.
It was like a 100-mile radius or whatever. And I was like, yeah. So I just like red line struck through all that and like sent it back to them. They were like, I don't know if this is going to work. I was like, well, either make it work or don't. It's okay.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to sign a document that says that I can't go work in the automotive industry within a 100-mile radius, because this is what I do. It's my career. So I'm not going to move 2 hours away, uproot my life and my family to go 2 hours away to work in the automotive industry because I signed some piece of paper. So I'm just like, I think you said First Pencil, which is hilarious. We bought a boat last year and I named it First Pencil.
Did you?
Yeah. I bought it. I bought it with no negotiation. Like
really?
They priced the boat. I was like, sure, I'll take it. And my wife's like,
dude.
Yeah, we talked about it beforehand. Like we were in agreement that was going to, but anyway, she's like, I can't believe you didn't try to negotiate. And I was like, I signed up on First Pencil. So we named it First Pencil.
That's a great name.
Yeah. So little car.
A little call back to the car business.
Little tribute to the car business. Yes.
That is one of the things that I learned, getting back to the radio business. I've even had people that, are still working in radio. And I said, look, if I were ever entertained the notion of doing a morning show or something like that, I would say, and no one's ever done this, going into it, look, give me your best spot set. Yeah. That's what you're going to pay me.
Yeah.
All the revenue from that spot set in my time, that'll be my daily pay. Daily pay. Because now I got skin in the game. Now I want to go out. It's certainly made me a lot more empathetic to salespeople in that business.
Absolutely.
Because in that business, there's a big chasm typically between sales and programming. I was always in programming.
Yeah.
And hey, show's over. Where are we going? Who are we going to go talk to? We got let's go close somebody. You know what I mean? That's how I would kind of go into it. Because the more I get out there and I show people the value of buying on my show.
Absolutely. Build value.
Right.
Inherently, more advertisers should be wanting to advertise during your time slot, because more people are tuning in and listening. They're getting more exposure. So it's like, I bring value to the table.
Right.
with what I do. So yeah.
And here I am right in front of you having a sales background. It's funny that your dad told you never to go into the car business. I've actually told my kids to do that.
Yeah.
I said, even if you spend a couple of years and you hate it, it's still a learning lesson, because if you get great at what you hate, to quote Cardone, that's still a valuable thing to kind of stick in a good feather to stick in your cap. Oh, yeah. I did this. I endured. I was very good at it. I didn't really enjoy it, but you know what? Look at what you've learned.
Yeah.
And it's like, there's a business in and of itself, I think, just coaching kids,
yes.
To just give it a shot,
It'll teach you so much.
It really does.
Yeah.
It really does. It's one of those things that I just, I look back at that time and it's so profoundly impactful, so hugely impactful. Because my kids don't listen to me.
Yeah.
Because I'm dad. Yeah.
I got a buddy, he said, everybody should have to serve, like 2 years in the military. And I laughed at that. And I was like, no, everybody should have to serve 2 years in the car business. Because that separates
yeah.
It's where the rubber meets the road.
It really did. It really is, because it's, you have it teaches you how to prospect, because sometimes you just have to.
Yeah.
You don't always have inbound traffic. There's so many elements to it. I can't go on and muff about it, but
yeah. And just how to deal with people, how to work with people, how to,
Dude, I remember watching you during trade walks. That was one thing that popped into my head just a couple of minutes ago. I'm like, I got to bring that up. Trade walk, for those of you who don't know, was, a couple times a week, we'd all get together as a sales staff, whoever was available. And you'd walk in the fresh trades from the weekend or maybe later in the week. And we would grade them, say what they needed, put a price on it, kind of mentally prepare you, and also put a kind of a mental stock room, so to speak, in your head in terms of getting in front of another customer, knowing hey, if this doesn't work, I know I got this. And we would all just kind of mind meld around these things. But it was also a time where sometimes we would just goof off, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And those times I would get I could see you just get visibly quiet, and wait for everybody to kind of settle down. And you go, okay, moving on, and we go move on to the next car and everything. And I'm like, yeah, I kind of was one of those things I took with me where I was like, that's a good tactic. He just stayed quiet until everybody was like, uh-oh.
Appreciate the comedic relief, but I have a job to do here.
Right.
Let's move along to the next one. So yeah.
I've got 18,000 things to do today.
Yeah. Yeah. This is, just one of the 73 things I need to do in the next 5 hours. So, can we all get serious about this for about 15 minutes and then move on? But
it was also a very big learning experience in terms of approaching the pricing of product and,
Yeah, I think, to be able to have those conversations, to get the buy-in from the team that, this is, are we going to keep this car or not?
Yeah.
Is it going to be worthy of us selling it? What to sell it, what do we need to do to it? What's the cost that we're going to incur? It was almost like putting a P&L together on a car. Yeah. It's like, okay, here's what we've got in it. Here's the recon that we need. Here's the market price.
Right.
Does this make sense, to be able to do this kind of work to this car and for, it's on the retail market. Sometimes we look at a car and say, okay, well, maybe I missed this one a little bit. And, based on what we put in it or what we had to put in it to trade for it, the amount of reconditioning that needs to go into it, we're never going to get any money out of this car on the retail side of things. It should probably just go to auction.
Right.
But, I try to make a car out of everything because that's what Steve told me, it's a numbers game.
Yeah.
The more cars you have, the more cars you sell.
Yeah.
So, all those cars that maybe you and so-and-so snub their nose at, that's figure out a way to make a car out of that. So there's a butt for every seat. So, get it to, and he was also like my shop, you got to take care of my shop. So,
right.
Because a lot of people don't understand about the car business is on the sales side of things. This is a true misconception of the car business. Everybody thinks that.
I was about to ask, what do people need to take away with it?
Yeah. Everybody thinks that you just make thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars on every car deal on the front end of it. And that couldn't be further from the truth. Yeah. The margins are very small. So, Steve Brink and I were having a conversation one day working through leadership and kind of my next steps. He, kept talking about big picture. And I was just so concerned about, what every single car was going to make. And he said, you got to think about it. He said, every car that we sell, 6 to 8 cents of each dollar is going to fall to the bottom line of the P&L.
Mm-hmm.
On the service and parts side of things, 65 to 70 cents of every dollar is going to fall to the bottom line.
It's still feeding a part of the business.
It is. Yeah. It is. So that's what a lot of people don't realize. They're like, oh, you're making a, it's like, no, I'm not making, I used to have a manager, I always used to tell customers, we're not going to Jamaica off your car deal, and that was kind of it was the wrong way to approach it, but I used to explain it to people, basically like Steve explained it to me. I'm like, look, at the end of the day, I know that the perception is that, this is like the 1980s where, every single car that was sold, thousands of dollars were being made, but the market's way more competitive these days. I mean, there's, especially with the internet and the fact that there's 6 other Honda stores or, 3 other Mercedes stores or 5 other Cadillac dealerships or whatever brand I was running at the time. And it's like, it's so competitive that you're not able to make those huge grosses on cars anymore. So the margins are much smaller. So, I'm not making, you're wanting a $15,000 discount on a $40,000 car. That just doesn't make sense. Like I know that, that's the perception is that you're going to get the absolute best deal you can, but there's not that much margin. Like we don't have those kinds of margins to play with. And that, we don't make thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars off each car deal. Getting somebody to understand that I was losing money to sell a car. No, you're not. And I'm like, no, I literally am losing $2,000 to sell this car just because I have to get it out of my inventory and off my books.
Yeah.
So I don't have to pay any more floor plan interest on it.
Right. So that's the other thing that people don't understand either is the floor plan aspect.
Yeah. I mean, you drive on one of these dealerships, there's probably $12-14 million worth of inventory. There are very few car dealerships out there that write checks for everything. I mean,
You can't.
Otherwise, you'd have $12 or $14 million. Yeah, exactly.
It's not a good use of your capital. Did you find that was easier getting to the Mercedes dealership, that people just naturally understood that?
I think people understood money and business a lot more on that side of things. So you got a lot less pushback when you try to explain, the pricing and the market and the competition and just the industry in general. They're like, okay, makes sense. Because a lot of those guys are entrepreneurs, business guys.
As I brought up philosophies early on in the conversation, I've been like thinking of all the things, if you haven't been able to tell, bringing them up as they come to mind. That's also one thing I got from you was the transparency aspect of it and just being upfront with people and telling them, I remember, I think it might've been you that said, oh my gosh, you're making money off the financing. And I because at the time you'd bring in a manager for a TO, turnover is what they called it. Mm-hmm. You'd know if you bought a car that typically the manager is going to come over and say hello and if there's anything I can do, or maybe the salesperson's at a stalemate or something like that. So they bring the manager over. That's what that is for those of you who are listening. So in some of those instances, somebody would challenge you on the interest rate. And you'd be like, well, yeah, that's a profit center for us.
Yeah.
And it would take the wind right out of their sails.
Yeah.
You just admitted it.
Yeah. I'm not going to lie to you about sell a car.
And it's one of those things that even like at the times, I don't know if Sonic didn't want us to do it, but they had the used car, I called it the used car trademark marketplace, essentially, like the stock market. Yeah. And because we would take the trades in, do our appraisals and stuff like that. Local used car manager would put a number on it, and then Sonic Corporate would put their number on it. And I would, while that was happening, I would actually turn the screen around and show them, be like, oh, so they might actually, he may have a number on it, but they may come back as higher. I said, so you see these things all over the place. Sometimes they're lower. That's the number we go with. Does that make sense? Yeah, that makes total sense. That transparency was such a game changer.
Yeah.
Just the willingness to be transparent was huge.
Yeah, I think that's been probably one of the best things for the automotive business is becoming more transparent, more transparent with the client that, that invoice that's locked away in the safe back there that's hidden that no one will ever see, and you'll never truly know how much this car cost us.
That's right.
It's like those days on
secret.
Yeah, we keep it secret. But no, I mean, it's again, the transparency. I mean, there's so much information out there, Edmunds.com, Kelley Blue Book, Carfax, so many different, Cox Automotive, they've got so many different things that, helps not just the dealers do their job, but also helps the consumer.
Yeah.
Stay informed about, what this thing looks like and what you can expect to pay. I remember TrueCar came out, the true value of what you should be paying in the marketplace and putting that out there for consumers, because it's like, that $22,000 Honda Civic that you thought you were going to come in and offer us $14,000 for. Yeah. It's like, because, you still think it's 1982 and everybody's got $15,000 markup in a car. It's like, no. This is what a third party industry expert says that you should pay for this car. It's actually, $20,300, but I've got it marked for $19,900. So you're actually getting a better deal than what a third-party industry expert says this vehicle is worth. Does this make sense? And then, you see the light bulb click and they're like, oh, okay, yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
So
sometimes even then they wouldn't buy it. What is the best interest of TrueCar? Okay. Is to attract more eyes to their website, and stuff like that. It's not to serve us. They're not certain to win us any favors by telling us the car is worth $4,000 less than the sticker.
No, they're not.
Yeah. Here's the thing that you guys can take away, if anything, from this podcast episode. We're both in different elements of our lives right now, but yet we still go back to talking about the car business.
Because it truly was one of the most interesting things that I've ever done in my life.
Right.
Thinking back to, the start of my career, where I say career and job. My first job was bagging groceries at 15. So that's like where I started working.
Right.
And then when I look back at all the jobs that I've had between 15 and 47, that 20 years in the car business was the longest time I was ever in, doing one particular thing. And I was doing, several different things within that, but, the actual automotive business. So for 20 years, that's what I knew. And I think I'll always go back to that. I learned so much from not just the automotive business and being in it, but the people that I met in the automotive world, the Steve Brinks, the Brian Palmers, the truly impactful people, the Jim McCarthys of the world, the Mike Mercurios, the Jacob Browns, the guys that I worked with in the car business that I wanted to make a huge impact on their lives. But honestly, they probably made more of an impact on my life than I made on theirs.
It's a reciprocity in that.
It really is. It really is.
Well, with that being said, I'm not going to tie you up for much longer. How do people find and follow you? And what do you want them to do when they do find and follow you?
Yes. Our website's www.routeconsultant.com. So whether you're, in the logistics space and want to, grow and expand, or, whether you're wanting to get in the logistics space and become an entrepreneur, or you want more education and training about the logistics space, we cover all those things. We do consulting and brokerage. You can find me and my team and all that we do on that website. We also have a podcast, Shipping and Handling, a Route Consultant podcast. It's on Spotify, Amazon, Apple, YouTube, all the majors.
Send me all that information. I'll put it in the description.
I will. Yeah, I'll send that over to you. But no, if you're, like I said, even if you think that it's something you might want to do, go check us out. Reach out to one of my guys, submit an inquiry, reach out to one of my guys, let them have a conversation with you. We'll try our best to explain everything. If you don't, you can go to YouTube, type in Route Consultant, brokerage consulting. We've got a ton of free content out there that you can consume. And then we've got, various things from there. So, again, I think our mission in life is to educate and train as many people as we possibly can about what this space is, and try to give them as much information and let them make a decision whether it's right for them. And then if it is, then we'll work alongside them and help them through that journey. And then, even after they stand up or close on that, a lot of them call them stand-ups when you close on the business and actually take over. Once you close on that business, we'll also be there after the fact if you need anything from us, need any help, whether it's education, training,
all that stuff.
All that stuff. So, yeah.
And of course, you can always find and follow us if you haven't found us by now, that you've been listening all this time. mmtbp.com. That's mostly Middle Tennessee Business Podcast.com if you really want to type it out. But I've done you a favor and shortened it and to a nice little acronym that makes no sense if you say it. mmtbp.com. If you want to be a guest on the show, there's an application there. You can click that button in the link and all that fun stuff. And Matt, It's always a pleasure, man. Thanks for coming out here.
Jim, it's been great. Thank you so much for having me on. It's awesome. I've been following your podcast for a little while now and been watching it. And,
well, thank you. You're awesome. You're my one listener.
No, there's more.
I know. At least tens of tens.
Tens of tens.
Thanks, pal.
Thank you.